We have a bar that's open, and you can stay after the meeting if you want to, or we'll join the meeting. Also, there's several bathrooms for the ladies and one for the gentlemen on this side. Another bathroom through that exit side to the right for either sex, and then there's bathrooms through that rear door by the bar to two bathrooms on the other side. And I want to welcome you here tonight. It's really nice to see all these, especially new faces that weren't here the last time, and that's why we ran out of chairs. So maybe the next time we have a meeting, we'll have it at a larger venue. But thank you very much for coming, and apologize for those that have to stand. The meeting is going to be short tonight. We're going to tell you what we've been doing since the last month, and you'll be very pleased with what's happening. And as you all know, you're getting information, and it's going viral. So we're very, very happy about what's happening. That people are getting to know what is going on. They asked me to welcome you tonight, and for my part, as a minister, as a priest, I want to talk about just a few minutes about the moral issue. It's not only economic where we're suffering and social and whatever, but there's a spiritual dimension here. When you have husbands that have to go out west to work or anywhere else to work and leaving their wives and children home, that's not right. They should be here with their children, bringing up their children, and breaking up families like this, and having poverty in the highest poverty rate in youth in Canada. That's a moral issue, and so we should be really worried about that particular aspect of it. I'm not preaching Catholicism or anything like that, that's for sure. But, you know, it's an issue. It's a very big issue. We've asked for an audit from the provincial government to find out where the money is going that's coming from Ottawa. There's an immense amount of money coming from Ottawa. And a lot of it is supposed to come down here. From my calculations, and I did calculations all my life. I have a degree in a doctor of engineering, so I did some mathematics. We should be getting around $1 billion a year. $1 billion a year. And what do we get? 15 billion. And how much do we give the province? 17 billion. So we're a deficit of $2 million, and we're supposed to be getting $1 billion or so. That's unimaginable. And that's been happening since 1988, 30 years. And we didn't know. We didn't know. And there's a bunch of us here who have been working on this for the last 15, 16 years. We have all the numbers. And the governments have never been able to challenge any of our numbers. Any of them. They come up with fancy political talk, or we did this for you, and we did that for you. And it's a lot of bull, and you know that. So, we want to know where the equalization money that is being spent by the federal government to lower our taxes. Your taxes should be half what they are now, and to give us equalization also in our infrastructure. I don't have to tell you what's happening to your roads and your sidewalks and whatever infrastructure you can think of, and that is what we're suffering from. The healthcare transfer, almost $1 billion comes from the federal government. Wouldn't it not be nice to say how much of that is coming to our hospitals, where we can't staff them, we don't have enough doctors, and we're closing some of these emergency rooms. Our walk-in clinics that the regional hospital has. I'm not talking about how long you have to wait for an appointment up there, but anyway, a doctor came here over in North City, and he put up a clinic, and he was going to take the people in for the weekends when the emergency was closed. The Department of Health closed in town, so he took off. And a lot of our doctors are leaving because they're not being paid too much, and they're being overworked. So that's another big issue. the provincial government should be brought accountable to you. They should be brought accountable. The Auditor General of Nova Scotia was approached by us, and he said, I can't touch your case for 18 months, he said. Imagine, billions of dollars, and he can't touch it for 18 months? That sounds like a political decision to me. That's not thinking. And I want to thank you for getting involved, because it's you people with the power to change things. We tried all those big fellows, the presidents, the premiers, the prime ministers, and all these guys, and we can't even get appointments with them. The first appointment we had with any one of those officials is next Thursday with Mark Icke. And we have questions to ask him. But the others don't want to talk about it because they don't have the answer. Or the answer is too painful for them because they're going to have to give up the money that they're free to spend wherever they want in the province. Not fair, not true, not good, not for us, that's for sure. We're a dying community. A dying community. So we're not going to die lying down, I'll tell you that. We're going to fight, and you're fighting. Thank you again. Thank you again for coming down. It's a sacrifice. You have to sacrifice. I have to sacrifice. We've been sacrificing, and you can sacrifice too. But we get the job done, and you'll be much happier. Your children, your grandchildren, and your parents, and everybody will benefit from what we're doing now, what you're doing now, coming here, and you'll find out later on from the fellows who have the information what we're going to do. Thank you very much.
My name is Gordon Sampson. I'm from North Sydney. And how did I get involved? Well, 10 or 12 years ago, I read a letter to the editor by Charles Sampson, who's over here at the right end of the table. Charles, no relative of mine. But anyway, I read the letter and I was convinced. So I came and joined the group, and I've been here ever since. And at that time, Rainey Halden was the secretary. He was the corresponding secretary. But Rainey was elderly and he wanted to do more work on his trailer in Marguerite. He was from Duncan Highway. So Rainey is not with us now. But I am corresponding secretary. So I take the minutes of every meeting, and you'll see me writing like mad on the Southpaw tonight, taking the minutes of this meeting. The board members, for lack of a better term, the ones that have been here long-standing, Father Al Maroon, Father Al Maroon, Gerald Sampson, John R. McDonald. John R. is not here tonight, just had an operation. Jim Guy, who's here tonight, political scientist. Shirley McIntyre, right over here. Martha Ross, right here. Myself, Terry McKay, right here. Lee McCachran, down the back. And we have, and Russell Green, of course, working with Father Al. Russell Green is a board member. We have 3 social media people working for us now, and they're doing a lot of work. Nigel Kearns, he's a media consultant. Patrick Doyle's right here working on with the camera. He's our cinematographer. And Mark Carabin is doing our website. So we have lots of people working for us. Regrets from David Johnson from CBU. He couldn't be here tonight. I see my counselor is here. I didn't think she was going to make it because she had a meeting. But Earlene McMullen is my counselor, and District 2, North Sydney. And she's here. That's great. Now, Dr. Robert Morgan, I don't know if you remember him. He's got a book out now, but he wrote 2 very important books, so I'm going to hold them up for a minute. These 2 books, if you want to know anything about Cape Breton, these 2 books, book 1 and book 2 by Bob Morgan. I knew Bob Morgan, didn't realize how great he was till I read these this year. These 2 books are so good, right from the beginning of First Nations and the Europeans, right up to 1900, and this one's from 1900, right up to the steel plant, right up to the current times. So those 2 books are excellent history of what we're about, and really, I think they should be compulsory for councillors, MLAs, MPs, at least. Okay, the 1982 Constitution. Do you remember Pierre Elliott Trudeau and the Queen sitting down and signing all that? That was 1982. Includes the word equalization and expects the country to distribute it in a way that provides comparable services for equal taxes for every Canadian. We are not getting equal services like everybody else in Canada. So in reality, the government is being illegal. The provincial government is not distributing this funding according to the Constitution. We shouldn't put up with it any longer. And I just want to show you 2 sheets of stats here that I have. Here, these are actually the provincial government stats in color. And since 2015, they haven't recorded our entitlements. They're not even including them anymore. But we're onto them. And there are the facts, we're right up to date. Okay, why are you important? Well, there's strength in numbers, right? So we're really glad that you're here tonight. And we're thanking you for coming, and we hope you'll come out again. Now, now what's our plan? We have a plan. Our plan is to have at least 3 demonstrations. One here at CBRN, one at the legislature, and one at the Strait of Council, depending how each one goes. That's our plan. Now, we need a lot of people. We're hoping to get 3,000 to 5,000 people to come out when we're ready to do a demonstration. We'll need somebody with a megaphone, and we'll need some chants. You've seen that before. And good. And here's one of them will be saying, what do you want? Equalization. When do you want it? Now. So let's try it. I'll yell it out and you answer equalization. What do we want? Equalization. When do we want it? Now. Once more. What do we want? Equalization. When do we want it? Now. Thank you.
We'd like to call up Darius Powell. He spoke at our last meeting. We'd like to have him talk again. Darius, come on up.
Good evening, everyone. I'm humbled to be at the microphone again. It was a month ago, if you recall, that I probably got the intestinal fortitude to get up and say something, because I believe very much in the work that is being done by these gentlemen and ladies behind me and the rest who are here. This is not my speech, by the way. This is just for reference. My wife is here somewhere, sitting in the back. She probably would be putting her face down right now. But anyway, she is as committed to it as I am. And since the last time I spoke to you, the first time I spoke to you, I think I'll give you a little update on what has happened regarding me and this issue. I was at my favorite coffee shop and stopped in with a friend when seated at the next table was a gentleman I remembered from United Protestant Church of Sydney River, which I started attending when we moved here in the summer of 1997. And this gentleman said to me, well, he said, I see you're involved in this too, the equalization. I said, yes, were you? Yes, he said. I was involved when it started 17 years ago, and I've got the stacks of correspondence and paper at home. He said, I would be at it still, but he said, I haven't been well, and my wife isn't well either, so that's where most of my energies go. But I wish you all the best. And one of the things he told me, I said, well, I think we'll do very well at that. We're starting to get a lot of people on board. Well, he says, there are some people that will not come on board. And he said, in fact, they are not very pleased with what you're attempting to do. And we ran into that when we started this. And I'm wondering, I said, well, why would anybody be against children living at the poverty level, families living at the poverty level, families having to leave to get jobs, men having to leave their families to go way out west as far as Fort St. John in northern British Columbia to earn a living wage for their families, their wives, their spouses, and their children back in Cape Breton. Why? Oh, he says they have their reasons. They're happy with it just the way it is, and they'd like to see it stay that way. Well, I didn't ask names, but I started wondering about that, and I'm thinking to myself, why in heaven's name would anybody be against progress? They're like the Luddites, who threw their wooden clogs into the milling machines in the Midlands of England when they became automated and the jobs weren't required anymore. Well, we're not Luddites, and we're not in a machine, and we do want progress because of the end product, which will be, I firmly believe, we'll see our young families staying. We'll see our men and women who are out west trying to make a living wage for their families coming back, because with a fair share of the equalization money that goes from the federal government to the provincial government in the HRM, and this is not against Halifax, by the way, when that money is fairly distributed in the CDRM, in every other municipality on Cape Breton Island, and I'll even include the 48 or so, no, there are 50 municipalities in the province of Nova Scotia. The top two, of course, are the CDRM, number 2, number 1, the HRM, but all the way down to Yarmouth. And I have to wonder if they're facing the same problems, because surely their men, their families, their young people will be moving too. If there's not enough infrastructure and money for growth in their communities, then they have to leave. Having said that, I wonder again, how can anybody be so selfish as to think what the current situation is good for me? The current situation, when it changes, will be, and it will change, it has to change. The current situation, when it changes, will be better for everyone. And the people who would not wish to see that happen should realize it will also be better for them. It works all around. Now, a couple of things. I've been researching some things about the Canadian Constitution. There's some very simple rules in there. Now, one is the guarantee of rights and freedoms. Legal rights. Everyone, this is every Canadian, has the right to life, liberty, and security of the person, and the right not to be deprived thereof, except in accordance with the principles of fundamental justice. Equalization, Part 3, equalization and regional disparities. Without altering the legislative authority of Parliament or of the provincial legislatures, or the rights of any of them with respect to the exercise of their legislative authority, Parliament and the legislatures, together with the government of Canada and the provincial governments, are committed to these three things. A, promoting equal opportunities for the well-being of Canadians. That is coast to coast to coast in Canada. Furthering economic development to reduce disparity in opportunities. That's B. And C, providing essential public services of reasonable quality to all Canadians. Now, there are a couple of fields here in Cape Breton that we are not seeing C as well as we would like to see it, and I think you know the services we're talking about. So then we turn over and we say, well, we are being denied that. It's here. It's in the Constitution Act of 1982. Then we go over to our very own Human Rights Act here in the province of Nova Scotia. The purpose of the Act is to A, recognize the inherent dignity and the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family. B, proclaim a common standard for achievement of basic human rights by all Nova Scotians. Sounds good, doesn't it? And E, recognize that the government, all public agencies, and all persons in the province have the responsibility to ensure that every individual in the province is afforded an equal opportunity to enjoy a full and productive life, and that failure to provide quality of opportunity threatens the status of all persons. And that, I feel, very much applies to us with the inequitable distribution of the equalization payments the government of Nova Scotia receives from the government of Canada. When my wife and I moved here in July of 1997 from Corner Brook, Newfoundland, where we raised our family, the thing that I liked, we went house hunting, and the thing that I liked the most about that was going into neighborhoods to see a house that was up for sale, and on a summer evening, watch the kids, the neighborhood kids, playing in the street, playing in the backyards. That's the kind of neighborhood that I was raised in Corner Brook. That's the neighborhood our children were raised in. And that was the kind of neighborhood that we were looking for. And we found that neighborhood also in Floral Heights. There were kids on the street that were riding their bikes in the spring, and the little girls were out pushing their dollies around, and they'd shortcut through the property. And Mr. Howell, can we come through here? Yes, go on. Love to have you here. Built a tree house for our first grandchild, who was born in Newfoundland when they visited. Mr. Powell, can we go to the tree house? Yes, go in the tree house. That's what it's there for. It's children who also make the neighborhood. But there aren't so many children around now in any of the neighborhoods in Floral Heights, unless you go up to Mountain View Elementary and see the scores of kids who arrive by bus every day. And I would say the same is true for most neighborhoods in the CBRN. The young people are the stock of tomorrow. Unfortunately, as in Corner Brook, where we raised our kids when they finished high school, they had to go. And neither came back. One's in Halifax, the other's in St. John's. We need to put a stop to that here in Cape Breton. We need to see the young families back. I would say there are many other communities on Cape Breton Island who feel the same way. Don Shiphead's movie of 1967, Going Down the Road, is still as valid today in Cape Breton as it was back then. And we've had enough of our folk go down the road. Let's see them coming back. And I think that can happen if this island, this municipality, every other municipality on this island, gets its fair share of the equalization payments. Now, here is the irony. Most of that money stays in the coffers of the government of Nova Scotia, in the HRM. The HRM itself does not qualify for equalization money because of its low unemployment, high job level, high standard of living, all the municipal amenities and provincial amenities it has, because there are properties outside the boundaries of the former Halifax that are also benefiting, as are properties and communities outside the borders of the former Sydney, because of amalgamation. But here's the thing, and this is the irony of it. For a municipality that doesn't qualify for equalization money, yet they still get the bulk of it. That makes no sense. There has to be somebody who's going to scratch their head, if not in Halifax, maybe in Ottawa, and says, that can't continue. Now, when we came into the meeting this evening, we were given a list of all the email addresses of our provincial MLAs and our federal MPs. I would encourage you to write. Now, your MPs' addresses were not there, but they're readily available. Just call the office. And it costs nothing to mail them a letter. And by the way, it costs nothing to send that letter to the Prime Minister, Justin Trudeau. Remember, his dad, the late Pierre Elliott Trudeau, send him a copy as well. As for the MLAs, do likewise. Write them, every one, even if they're not your MLA. Write them, send out a message. Maybe somebody will finally say, you know what, these folks have a valid point. Enough is enough. Thank you very much.
I'd like to introduce Charlie Palmer. Come up. There he is.
First of all, I'd like to say I've been around for a fairly long time. Long enough to fight to get the railway back. Long enough to fight against all the actions the federal and the provincial government have placed us in a position where we're in one hell of a mess. That can all be corrected. And it can be corrected by the very same people that put us in that mess. Now, if I might elaborate, I go back when we had 22 trains a day running up here. We had over 12,000 people working in the mines, in the steel industry, and in Marine, Atlantic, and North City. All young people. Where are they today? Think about it. This didn't happen easy because there's people that fought as hard as they could, people in our councils, some of our politicians, trying to correct the mistakes that were made by previous politicians. That big mistake was when they cut out the Atlantic Freight Rates Act. When they cut out the Atlantic Freight Rates Act, down the tube went Cape Breton. And now, try to make it return. I recall when I was in council, Russell Richter came to me, and I was on a planning committee. He said, Charlie, I know you've been fighting against the Transportation Act loss that it was going to cause, but that's not so bad, because we got something to look forward to. And that was industrial estates. A government agency was formed that was going to take place and put everything back in place that was lost. So then he called me in 5 months later, said, Charlie, we're in luck. General Instruments are going to establish a plant on Vulcan Avenue. It's going to employ all kinds of people. And he said, you know, the domino effect is going to take place. Other industries will follow. I said, Russell, that's nice news. But I said, the bad news we had when Mr. Nowlin, the PC member in the Valley, decided to get rid of the Transportation Act, the Atlantic Act, I said, that really killed us. But don't worry, Charlie. He said, we're on a roll now. I said, okay. Toyota came in. He was proud, we were all happy. Everybody's working. Pyro Minerals came in. That was great. More employees. Our industrial park sites were filling up. Everybody is saying those things are working out great for us. Then, of course, Magna came in. Frank Strong came down to Sydney. I was in conversation with him. And I said, Frank, I said, do you think it's a possibility that you'd be able to stay here? He said, Charlie, as long as we can make a buck, we'll be here. Fair answer. Now, sometime later, we got a notification that General Instruments were closing down. And then things were not so good, looking so good. Then we got a notification that Pyro Metals were closing down. Finally, all of those industries, and Frank Strong's history just recently has gone down. So now we have a mess. We had a job opportunity, we got all these industries in the area, but we had no way of making sure they stay here, because the money that was given to them was gone, and so were the industries. Now, let's take a look at what happened after that. We fought like we did hell to keep our passenger rail service here. And they said, oh no, 1989, Brian Mulroney. He went into all of the regions in Canada and slashed all the passenger service. Sydney, we had the highest per capita in the country for rail liner service. But that wasn't good enough. It was gone. But then they said, don't worry, we're going to look after you through agencies such as IEL, ACOA, and so on. Now, it never happened. They looked after us for a while, and they just let us go and wouldn't listen. The federal and provincial government owe us one hell of a lot in Cape Breton. They owe us a lot. And they have an obligation, was just indicated by your previous speaker, they have an obligation to make sure that this area becomes viable. Now, how does it become viable? Let's take a look at that question. Not too hard to figure out. We know one thing, all the industries come in here, we can get them in here if we give them the money and do the right thing. As I said before, the trick is to hold them here. Now, how can you do that? Well, the thing is, you sure as hell can't do it if they can't compete. Now, I go back to when I was a very young fella. My next door neighbor his name was Dan Cameron. And they were working at that time on the National Transportation Policy, which was designed to provide each opportunity to compete with the industries in Ontario, which was our coal and our steel. Cape Breton provided practically all the coal to keep the power plants going in Ontario. And the steel plant produced the best steel at that time in Canada. But we were competing with Algoma and Stelta. To make things forth, they provided a subsidy for those industries. And when they provided a subsidy for those industries, we were shipping out 22 trains a day. Not only for Cape Breton. Cape Breton was helping the whole of Eastern Canada with their employees here, all along the line, through Stellar to Glasgow, right through to Montreal. Just from this steel plant and the coal mines. We lost them. They created DevCo. But when they created DevCo, we still had a problem then. We now cannot compete because our transportation costs are too high and we have to get the railway back. Now, I have an awful lot more I could say, and I don't want to tie the meeting up tonight, but I want to thank you very much for this opportunity, and I just want to say we're going to get that railway back, and I hope it will not be Genesee, Wyoming. As I stated, I hope it's not Genesee, Wyoming, because I'll tell you what, if we do have a container port, and we will, because nature has given us the closest to Europe, the container port will come, and there's going to be a railway company that's going to make a bloody fortune, and that company should be a Canadian company, not an American company. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlie. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Margaret Fraser.
Good evening. I was invited to come here today to speak to you a little bit about healthcare. I think what I'm going to say is going to be a little bit of a detour from what we've been talking about to a certain extent, but if you bear with me, I think we'll come back to the point. I grew up in this neighborhood, and I have to say that I'm rather shocked, horrified to see what this neighborhood has become. When I grew up here, this was a nice neighborhood. It was a bit rough around the edges. There was an accident out in front of my house about once a week, and there was an accident on the corner about once a day, because Townsend Street was the highway, and that was a very busy road. There were trucks going up and down that street all hours of the day and night, going out to the steel plant, going out to the heavy water plant, going out to the mines. And they all went right past my front door, and they all came back right past my front door. Townsend Street is a backwater now compared to what it used to be. It's still a very busy street, but there's not much going on. Now, I was away for about 25 years, and I moved back here in 2008. When I came back in 2008, we had 4 fully functioning emergency departments in Cape Breton County. A fairly high density for the population, but they were well used, and they were needed. They were open night and day. We had 2 ICUs, one in Glace Bay and one in Sydney. We had labor and delivery services in Glace Bay and Sydney. we had vascular surgery, we had thoracic surgery, we had 6 ophthalmologists, and in addition we had geriatric services. I got my May emergency schedule today, and I opened it up and thought, okay, I'm working about the same number of shifts I always am. And then as I always do, I looked to see if there were any shifts, empty shifts at the regional, and thank goodness there are not. If there were any empty shifts in North Sydney, and if there were any empty shifts in Glace Bay. And I almost fell off my chair. Glace Bay in May is going to be closed 24 hours for 9 days. Glace Bay is going to be closed, the emergency department, every single night in Glace in May. There will be no overnight emergency department coverage in Glace Bay at all. A number of years ago, North Sydney was closed overnight. It was supposed to be a temporary measure because we didn't have enough nurses to staff and we were short physicians. North Sydney has never reopened at night since that decision was made, and in the May schedule, only 16 of the 31 days of May have a physician to staff it. This is not because there's no money to pay people. It's not because it's not budgeted for those departments to be open. It is because physician recruiting has been so poor down here, and we have been so unable to retain physicians in this area that there's simply nobody to keep the doors open and nobody to keep the lights on. So those emergency departments are going to be lost if we don't do something and do it soon. We face the very real possibility that through the summer, through June, July, and August, when physicians will be taking vacations, and we will be losing other physicians in those time periods, that we will only have the regional emergency left out of those 4 emergency departments. I've seen emergency departments that historically have never closed, having closures. Badek doesn't close. Badek has been closed in the past month. Badek has been closed several times in the past year. Straight Richmond has never had closures before. Straight Richmond has had closures this month. We are facing a crisis in healthcare that is being ignored by our provincial government. We used to have thoracic surgery. We don't have it anymore. If you have lung cancer, you go to Halifax. We used to have 2 full-time vascular surgeons. One went to Ontario, for reasons I will not go into. One retired because he reached retirement age, and surgery is a difficult profession to pursue beyond a certain age. Rex Dunn continued to do surgery for some time, and he's still listed as a vascular surgeon, even though he's retired, and at the moment, I believe he's still on a round-the-world cruise, but he's still listed as a vascular surgeon working in Sydney. So is Dr. Naqui, who is north of 80 years old and hasn't been in an operating room in at least 6 years. That is the vascular service that our provincial government means we have when they say we still have vascular surgery here. 2 gentlemen who are both over 70 and do no longer operate. Rex occasionally does a little bit. We used to have a geriatric service here. We don't anymore. We have the oldest population in Canada. Nova Scotia and New Brunswick are tied for the oldest populations in Canada. Cape Breton is the oldest part of Nova Scotia. So that means that we are number 1. We are the oldest part of Canada. And we don't have a geriatric service. That's crazy. We used to have 6 ophthalmologists. When I came here, we had 6 full-time ophthalmologists. We now have 3. It takes well over a year to get somebody in to see an ophthalmologist, even if you know they have a cataract, even if you know they need surgery, you're not getting them in to see anybody in under a year. So why do we have so much trouble recruiting and retaining physicians in this area? There are a lot of reasons, and this is not a simple answer, but at least part of it has to do with the services that are being offered here. The street that I live on looks like it was shelled over the winter. I drove home today, and I drive a Subaru Outback. I saw a pothole today that I honestly thought was going to rip both my axles off if I hit it. I did some ducking and dodging to get around that. Our schools are desperately underfunded. I'm sure all of you know somebody who has a child with special needs who's tried to get that child extra help, and there is no help with those children. Those children are falling between the cracks. We've lost physicians because they had children with special needs. We had a physician with a child who was autistic, and she moved to Ontario to be closer to a specialized program for children with autism. We've lost physicians because of the school system. We are going to lose physicians because of the potholes. The potholes are just the icing on the cake. The sheer lack of services in this area is really overwhelming when you start to look at it. In addition, the lack of young people. The aging population that we have is a very difficult demographic to take care of under the kind of medical system that we have. When you're being paid by the patient, you cannot spend half an hour with every patient. You want to. My office routinely runs at least an hour behind because you need to take the time to work with people and figure out what's going on with them. But every year, physicians get something called a practice profile, where we're shown what our patients are, what the age of our patients are, what kind of things we're doing in our practice. My average age in my practice is well over 65. 43% of my patients are over the age of 65. The provincial average is 20%. And the average size of a practice on the mainland is about 1,300 patients. I know I have at least twice that in my practice. We have had family physicians retire, we've had family physicians leave, we've had family physicians die, and they just aren't being replaced at sufficient numbers. Dal isn't training enough, and we're not able to recruit enough people here. And part of that is because we don't have money in our municipal coffers to hire a recruiter. We know that if you have a recruiter who calls physicians up and says, hey, how are things going? Is there anything I can do for you? You know, what's going on in your life? Is there anything that's gone wrong? Is there anything that needs to be fixed? If you've got that person, you're going to retain that physician because they get the sense that somebody cares what's happening to. What happens here now is you're basically told, here's your 1,300 patient roster. See you later. Good luck. And that's the last you see of the recruiter. I wasn't recruited. I recruited myself. I came back here because I'm from here and I still have family here. One of the most daunting things when you're coming into a new area is trying to figure out how you're going to set up your practice. There's a huge amount of equipment that has to be bought to set up a physician's practice. I was really lucky. I spent the first 4 years of my practice with Peter Jackson, who very generously shared his office space and his equipment with me. And then I took over another physician's practice and took over his equipment. But if I had to start from scratch, I probably would never have started a practice. I probably would have just done emergency medicine because the thought of going out and buying exam tables, cotton swabs, then you used to look at people's ears, all of that gear, it's a tremendous outlay. If we had a little bit of extra leeway at the municipal level, we could look at building a medical clinic. We could look at helping with some of those equipment costs with new physicians. But if you think you're only going to be in an area for 2 years and you're not really sure if you're going to like it, you're not going to go out and buy a ton of equipment. So that's also part of the puzzle there. Do I have answers for you tonight? Not really. But that's what's going on currently in healthcare. We have lost a tremendous number of services over the past 10 years. I think that's 10 years. That's not a really long period of time. 10 years is not a long time, and we have lost all of those services. I'm sure there are things that I've missed. We no longer do obstetrics in Glace Bay because there just isn't the support for it anymore. So everybody from that area of the municipalities now has to come into town to have their baby. They were delivering babies in Glace Bay 2 years ago, but it's not happening there anymore. So we're losing services every day, and we need to turn it around. So thank you very much for listening to me.
Just want to open up to the councillors if they want to come up and say anyone or anything from any of the councillors.
No, we're listening. That's what we're
Okay, that's very good. I think we should give all a round of applause to the councillors for being here tonight. Myself, when we started this campaign, was a little hard on the councillors because they were government. And I had the approach with them maybe wasn't so great, but they seem to have rallied around and they seem to be standing behind us, and we should all be very thankful for that. So, we have a couple questions here. Who's in this room has heard equalization before 6 months ago? Put your hands up. Who has just recently heard about equalization? Okay. Who's sick of seeing Halifax get everything?
Amen.
And who's here ready to stand up and fight for that right? Very good. Well, we wanted to, we had a presentation from the Cape Breton Regional Police Service tonight to talk about protesting. So I just want to talk about that a little bit now, because we're at that stage. This was a 4 or 5 month journey, and here we are, we're ready for it. So we're aiming for the first, second week of May, and we're going to be doing it at the Provincial Building on Prince Street in Sydney here. And of course, we're going to need a large turnout. So we have an email blast system that we can use, and we have your phone numbers, and we have your emails, we have your contacts, and our board will start getting ready in towards the first week in May and inform you when that protest is going to be. I can't stress enough to tell you how important it is for a very large showing the first time. So when we send out those requests of where we're going to be and where we're going to meet, it's going to be very important for you to bring as many people as you can with you. So there's a ton of flyers on the back table for people to take with them. And also there's a list there of your MPs, your MLAs, Justin Trudeau's email address, Bill Morneau, who's a finance minister. It's very important that if it was me, I would send an email to my MLA and my MP, and then all of the rest, meaning the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Auditor General, Michael Pickup in Halifax. Because more pressure that's applied to him, the more he's going to feel, because the Auditor General is not part of government. They're a separate entity. They're paid by the government, but they're not part of the government. So if the Auditor General gets enough requests from people, he might have to actually do an audit. And if they do an audit and show where the funding is going and you know where our money is being spent, there's a lot of talk today on social media about the fact that this is a grand plan by Halifax, because as long as Halifax, or I say Halifax and I'm getting in trouble for that all the time, the provincial government in Halifax, as long as they can keep us depressed down here, it's a bigger fight to get more equalization money. The minute we start getting our fair share down here and improve our roads and build our infrastructure up and create jobs, lower our taxes, then they don't get it anymore. So for 25 years now, they've been doing that to us, keeping our infrastructure down. No one has seen any growth, but we've all been to Halifax. We've seen a bit of growth up there. So where's that money coming from? So this is why on those sheets, write your MLAs and write your, even reach the Prime Minister and let him know that we demand an audit to find out where our money is going. Because the long and short of it is, they wouldn't be getting it without us. So all this money's going into Halifax, and we're not seeing it. So that's pretty much it for the evening. We had the presentation from the CBRM, but I think what I'll do is I'll have them do up a letter to us, and we'll do an email blast to everyone and let them know, because there are certain rights that we have to protest, and there are certain rules we have to follow by the police. We are working very close with the police on this issue. They're going to be very present. They're very much behind us on this issue, and they want us to protest, and they're looking forward to it, and they're going to make sure that the peace is kept. Anyway, on behalf of Nova Scotians for Equalization Fairness, he was just mentioned that the next meeting is May 1st, but good news, the next meeting on May 1st is when you'll come and pick up your signs to protest. We'll have them here for you, and we'll make them known. A lot of people just mentioned here that it's now called the province of Halifax. Thanks again for the council for coming tonight, and thanks for everyone for coming, and we appreciate your time.